Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 Nissan Pathfinder, we're going to be showing you how to install the Airlift 1000 air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we get into that, let's just take a minute, check them out, and make sure that they're going to work for you. Underneath your Pathfinder, this is what the air springs are going to look like once you have them installed. And the way they work is really simple. Essentially, they just fit inside of your factory coil spring. And so once you inflate them full of air, it's going to provide additional support. And these are adjustable from 5 psi up to 35 psi. And so you can kind of fine tune them to your particular liking or whatever you're hauling. So obviously, you know, if you got something heavier, probably want to put more air in them. Something a little more light, less air. These are going to require a minimum of 5 psi regardless, so just keep that in mind, especially on those, you know, those fall evenings and mornings whenever it's warm out and it gets cool and pressure kind of drops. Not a bad idea to keep an eye on them. To make adjusting them a little bit easier in maintenance, you can pair these up with a compressor. Just keep in mind a lot of those compressors are pretty powerful, and you don't want to exceed that 35 psi because you go more than that in this bag, you know, you could potentially cause damage and things of that nature. So what these are mainly going to be used for is to prevent the back of your Pathfinder from sagging or squatting down. You know, we've all been there before, and if you're watching this, you're probably wondering how to fix that issue, but you load it up or pulling a trailer around, the back starts sagging, and you know, it's just causing unnecessary wear and tear on your suspension and your tires, and it affects everything, honestly. So by putting these in here, you can fill them up full of air, you know, get some additional support, get your vehicle back up to the factory ride height, and have a much better towing experience. There is another option for those of you that are looking for some additional support. There's actually a Firestone brand bag, very, very similar to this. And to compare the two, you know, not really a huge difference there. They're pretty much the same, at least in my opinion. I do kind of like the Firestone's fittings a little bit better. That's just me, but either way, you know, I mean, these are gonna get the job done and help out whenever you're towing or hauling around heavy items. As far as getting these installed, really straightforward. You know, you let the vehicle suspension hang, so jack it up by the frame, and then you'll kind of suck all the air out of the bag, the air spring, and then just put it in the coil, run your lines, and that's really about it. So no special tools or anything that really required. And if you're interested in seeing how that's done, feel free to follow along. We'll go ahead and put the bags in together now. To begin our installation, you're going to be underneath the back of your Pathfinder, and you want to jack it up by the frame. All right, that way your suspension will hang, and you'll have you know, adequate space here in your coil spring, because this is where the airbags are actually going to go. So just be sure to use, you know, proper safety precautions, jack stands, and so on. But to get this in there, we're going to have to do a couple of things. And it's easier if we go over to the workbench and get our bag sorted. So if you take your bag, pull the cap off of it, what you're going to want to do is try to smash this down as much as you can. Get all the air out of it, and then put that cap back on. And then that will allow us to kind of move this around and get it jammed inside of the coil spring. So to help things out a little bit, I sprayed this area down with some soapy water, and pretty straightforward here. We're just going to kind of bend this, make sure we put it in the right way. You want the fitting to face down towards the ground. So we'll just sneak that in. Until we get it inside of the spring. And then we should be able to kind of pull that cap off, let the air in it, and just kind of make sure this is positioned how it should be. So you want it to look just like that. So now we can take this little protector, and this is going to go on the bottom of the bag and that way our air fitting will pass through that opening there. So pretty straightforward. You can just kind of work it into position. We'll line that hole up, and then we'll take our air spring and just push that down flat to it. So now we can take our air line, and what you're gonna do, there's these little clamps that come with it. If you squeeze that, you'll be able to place it over the line. And then you're just going to push the air tube over that fitting. Make sure it's all the way up there. And obviously once we have that over the fitting, we'll come back and work our clamp on it. At this point, you'd simply just repeat this same process over on the other side to get that airbag installed. And then from there, we can start to route our air lines to our inflation fitting. So I'll get these routed and show you the path that I took to get there. So I got our airline routed, and you can follow the instructions too. They tell you to zip tie it up like this and give yourself a little slack, you know, because this control arm is going to move around. But then just routed it up along through here, use some zip ties to secure it, and here's where it drops down. I think we're going to mount our inflation valve, replace this plastic fitting with it. So I'm just going to let this hang, and we'll go over to the passenger side. I'll show you how I routed that one. On the passenger side, here comes our airline. And one thing to note over here, they give you a little heat shield. You can put that on the airline in this area where exhaust comes through. But pretty much the same deal. Just run it up along through there. And then I have it just kind of essentially just running along the top of our trailer hitch. So to get our inflation valve mounted up, I'm going to remove this push pin fastener. So you just take a flathead screwdriver and pry underneath it. It'll pop out. And then what you can do is take the valve, and you're going to thread on one of the nuts there. Push it right on through. And you're going to put on the rubber washer, followed by a flat washer, and then this star washer. And then the nut. And I'll just snug that down. You can do it by hand with a 1/2" socket. You don't have to crank down on it by any means, but get it snug. And since we're going to be running both of our bags into one fitting, that way they'll fill up at the same rate. Now we can grab the little T-fitting, tie the two lines together, and then eventually connect them to the back of our valve. So I started to kind of prep everything. It's just going to make it a lot easier. You're going to have the plastic T-fitting, all right, and I cut maybe like a 8" piece of line. Push that line over the T portion, put on a clamp. Other end of the hose, get your clamp on. And then the two hoses from the airbags, I also put clamps on, just so everything's kind of prepped all at once. And it's going to be pretty straightforward. So airbag hose into one end, other airbag into that end, and then this will go to our inflation valve. So we need to push all these on, just like we did on the airbag. These ones are really tight, so kind of just a quick pointer. You can put some heat to the hose, a heat gun or even a hair dryer. It doesn't take much. You don't want to get this thing cooking, but just a little bit, just to kind of make it warm to the touch almost. Like I said, you don't want to scald this thing or compromise it, so that just softens it up and makes it a lot more manageable to slide that end over. So I'll get that one on. Get our clamp in place. And I'll do the same thing for this one here. And now all that's left to do is put this end onto our inflation valve. And for our inflation valve, we'll work the exact same way. Now that we have everything hooked up, we can inflate the system to 30 psi. That way we can check for leaks. To check for leaks, obviously you can listen for them, but another way, you can take soapy water and spray down all of our connections. So on the bottom of the bag, all the T-fittings, inflation valves, all that stuff that we did where we made any connection, spray it down. And what you're looking for is for bubbles to be rapidly and consistently forming around there. And if you see that, that'll indicate a leak. Now obviously you're gonna have some from just spraying it on there, but as long as they don't continue to grow and keep forming, you know that everything is sealed up. If you do happen to have a leak, take the air out of the system, recut the line, get it back on the fitting again, and clamp everything back down, and that should correct the issue. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Airlift 1000 air helper springs on our 2020 Nissan Pathfinder.